Hello, my name is Emilia. Uh, Long time no see, I know. I just didn't feel like I had anything important to say to you guys, so I just thought to myself, why should I make a video if I have nothing to say? Just for the sake of making a video, that's fucking ridiculous. No, thank you. Uh, so anyway, today I actually have an opinion that I want to share, and that is about a wise, hyper intelligent man. A man that holds the transcendental intellectual value that has the potential to not only change the course of history but also change the way humans perceive the world around them. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, Jordan B. Peterson. A round of applause, please. So I know this dude gets a little bit of shit because of his weird stances on God and religion, which he totally deserves. This dude doesn't seem to grasp the concept of a moral code or unyielding values that are instilled in people's minds without the necessity of a divine punisher or fear of supernatural. Just ideologies and ethical principles that you can taught that you can teach children and just people in general, which is totally ironic, to be honest, because he can't stop huffing and puffing about social justice warriors being indoctrinated basically, and believing in these stupid ideologies and being brainwashed by the third wave of feminism and just social justice warrior agenda. So if these people can be brainwashed and indoctrinated, well, how can a moral set of principles can be so hard to teach people? Why? That is stupid. That is just simply ridiculous and absurd. I don't understand him, to be honest. But anyway, today I actually want to talk about something else. So I know he's a psychologist, I know he's a professor in some university from Canada, and he also holds lectures in different campuses. So I listened to some of his lectures, and let me tell you, they weren't more logical and they weren't smarter, to be honest with you. So I choose to speak about some of his stances on some really popular mental health issues, and that is borderline and anxiety. So let's get started.
Borderline personality disorder. I think I have enough mental energy to do that tonight. So, technically speaking, it's often considered the female variant of antisocial personality disorder. So it's classified in the domain of externalizing disorders, acting out disorders. And I think what happens, we don't understand borderline personality disorder very well. I mean, it's characterized by tremendous impulsivity, radical confusion of identity.
Oh, look at him. He looks like he's about to squeeze his brain out into a burst of cogently conceived lecture, sprinkled with small explosions of brilliance. That's until he opens up his mouth. No, borderline is not the equivalent of men's antisocial disorder. I don't even know where he got that information from, to be honest. Even though the common misconception on it is that borderline affects much more women than men, the recent studies and research made in regards to this specific disorder are surprisingly showing that the rates between men and women are pretty minimal, therefore insignificant.
One of the things that's interesting about people with borderline personality disorder, in my experience, is that they're often quite intelligent, and you see in the person with borderline personality disorder something like the waste or the squandering of tremendous potential. They seem capable of thinking through the nature of their problems and analyzing them and discussing it, but not capable whatsoever of implementing any solutions. And technically, there's no relationship between IQ and conscientiousness. It's very weird. Because if you read the neuropsychological literature, and you read about the functions of the prefrontal cortex, they're usually conceptualized in intellectual terms. And they're associated with planning and strategizing and so forth. And that's what conscientiousness is planning and strategizing and implementation. But the correlation between IQ and conscientiousness is zero. And so is the correlation between working memory and conscientiousness. Zero. And zero is a very low correlation, right? I mean, really, it's hard to find things in psychology that are correlated at zero. Things tend to be correlated to some degree. They tend to be interrelated. The borderline seems to be able to strategize and to abstract, but not to be able to implement.
After this indigo transcendental doctor dropped the ball, what we got left is a sloppy, clumsy description of borderline that is not necessarily wrong, but just really disjointed and all over the place. In my humble opinion, it could have been explained with more clarity and precision. Sure, these aren't such outrageous mistakes. I wouldn't consider it a big deal for ordinary people that have nothing to do with the field of psychology or neurology. But if you claim to be a psychologist, you should keep your information up to date. You should be able to present your information accurately and according to the most recent research and studies. That's what an expert in a particular field does. That's his or her job. End of story. His take on anxiety isn't much better. He seems to divagate into weird, irrelevant tangents. There are pure subjective interpretations, some of which that are even contrary to the objectivity that sciences like psychology and neurology are trying to achieve.
What you do with people who are afraid, and to some degree depressed, but certainly anxious, is you lay out what they're anxious about, first of all, in detail. What is it that you're afraid of? What might happen? And then you decompose it into small problems, hypothetically manageable problems, and then you have the person expose themselves to the thing that they're afraid of, and what happens isn't that they get less afraid. That isn't what the clinical literature indicates exactly. What happens instead is they get braver. And that's not the same thing, right? Because if you get less afraid, it's like, well, the world isn't as dangerous as I thought it was, you know, silly me. If you get braver, that's not what happens. What happens is, yeah, the damn world's just as dangerous as I thought, or maybe it's even more dangerous than I thought, but it turns out that there's something in me that responds to taking that on as a voluntary challenge and grows and thrives as a consequence. And
take this, for example. Usually, cognitive psychotherapy aims to reduce people's feelings of anxiety by gradually exposing people to their objects of fear and discomfort. This is the most common form of therapy applied in regards to anxiety. The success of this form of treatment comes from the fact that it does not deny the dangers and injustices of the world. So I totally agree on that with Jordan. That yes, the world is full of danger. But anyway, this therapy doesn't exacerbate those potential dangers either.
They have the ability, so if they're really introverted and high in neuroticism, they can usually talk quite well to someone one-on-one. Why? Because they look at them. Well, if I look at you, it's another thing to do if you're ever speaking to a group of people. Never speak to the group of people. That doesn't exist. You talk to individuals. And then they reflect for you the entire group, because they're all entrained. So you look at one person, they broadcast to you what everyone's thinking, and you know how to talk to one person. So it's easy. So as soon as you focus on the person, not you, you push your attention outward, use your eye, you push your attention outward and you start watching, well then all your automatic mechanisms kick in and you stop being awkward. Because if we're talking and I'm looking here, I don't know what you're going to do next, and I'm going to put disjunctions into the, like they're like bad chords in the melody of our conversation, and the reason is I'm not paying attention. So that's why the eye is the thing at the top of the pyramid. It's like the thing that enables you to win the set of all possible dominance hierarchies is the eye. Pay attention, pay attention. That's the critical issue. That's why the Egyptians worshipped Horus. That's why Horus was the thing that rescued Osiris from the depths. It's the capacity to pay attention. What do you pay attention to most? What your right hemisphere signals as anomalous. It attracts your attention. It's like, this isn't going quite right. I'm not looking at that. Wrong. That's what you look at. That's what you look at. What's not going right. Because that's the terrible monster that might eat you, but it's also the place you get all the information. So that's why it's useful to have discussions with your enemies, because they will tell you things you do not know, and that's...
It doesn't claim that the world is horrific, and you must be oh so brave and fight for every sparkle of ephemeral satisfaction and joy, as well as it doesn't claim that nothing bad is ever going to happen. Those dramatic, over-the-top stands, whether highly optimistic to the point of ignorance or highly pessimistic to the point of romanticizing the catastrophes and injustices of life in an attempt to place human life in an action-filled fairy tale where any person is a hero and the world in itself represents the ultimate antagonist, then this doesn't fit well with a science like psychology, a science that seeks to study human experiences and interactions in a detached way, as the neutral, equidistant observer, as the unjudgmental, objective narrator. I understand using symbols to metaphorically represent a state of mind, as its plasticity might help people understand their emotions a little better, and I understand and totally agree with the scientific explanations of our instinctive reactions that our ancestors transmitted to us, especially, the fight or flight instinct that we have. But I don't agree with using these feelings of grandeur as a way to approach your fear. That will just exacerbate the fear and anxiety, or the fear of anxiety. Cognitive therapy is trying to remove the constraints that nature placed on us. It's about taking the veil off the monsters we perceive in our head and see that they're way less scarier than we thought, although not entirely inoffensive, for sure. It's about losing and accepting it, not being the best in a game or in a job interview, and don't perceive it as is a lost battle in Game of Thrones and that it defines us as a whole globally, but it's simply a failure. That even though anxiety is a good thing to have most of the time, the threat we see is more often than not delusional and deformed in our subjective, easily influenced minds. In conclusion, I personally don't like the way he approaches mental health. I'm not impressed by the literature references he brings up to you. I think that is just to show off and create this image of a sensible, profound man, but it is just a facade. I think he's fucking ignorant as hell, honestly. But don't hesitate to disagree and tell me your opinion about him. I'm really curious to see. Thank you guys. Have a nice day.